Are live. Good morning and welcome to Money Matters, going live at 7 a.m. every single morning, only on onedealaway.com. My name is Nev, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about all kinds of cool things, including, is your broker cheating you? I've been doing these things and kind of pointing it out. I've been saying that the Wall Street is nothing more than a glorified casino. And in today's episode, we're actually going to uncover exactly how and why that happens. There's a lot of things that happen under the hood, so to speak, behind the curtain, whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor you'd like to use. But there's evidence, absolute evidence that I'm going to actually have today for you of how actually you're being taken advantage of every single time, or just about every single time you go to make trades. You get cheated out of great deals. You get less money for your sales, and all of it happens without you ever even knowing it. And today I'm going to actually cover exactly how and why that is. We're also going to be talking a little bit about like what's going on after the pandemic and sort of the massive debts and the financial bubbles that have exploded all over, not just in US but around the world, where we are getting all kinds of reports and evidence that things are just getting into this like super weird bubble territory, and have been ever since the sort of the correction in March. And all of those things have a big impact on us. So really important show. I'm excited to talk about it and hopefully help you decide and decipher what your next move should be. Let's do this. And good morning, good morning, good morning. All right, y'all. So, what we're going to be talking about is something that we started to have a conversation about yesterday, but I think it's important to get into it today and kind of continue talking about what is going on in the world. We also have some very important news from China, that China might be starting to slowly but surely prepare for de-dollarization, if not globally, but definitely for themselves. And so, first thing that I want to talk about is stuff that we started to talk about yesterday, and that's the post-pandemic world, a frightening mix of financial bubbles and massive debt. This was a very interesting article. I think it's crucially important for everybody to really pay attention to kind of what's going on and what's been happening in the world when it comes to the economy. And I think you definitely want to pay attention to some of these things that's they're evolving and transpiring. The biggest challenge and the biggest constraint on governments, businesses, and household and the central bankers will be the legacy of debt. This is one of those reasons that I kept saying, they're not going to be able to stop printing. And, at some point, we might have to go into the debt jubilee. But again, I don't know how things are going to happen exactly. This is just one crazy guy's thoughts and ideas. The US debt levels have already reached a historical levels even before the coronavirus outbreak. Global public debt is now the biggest in recorded history after government fiscal programs have added about 11 trillion US dollars to bring the total to more than 100% of global GDP. In advanced economies, according to International Monetary Fund, public debt is forecast to grow nearly 19% this year to reach about 130% of global GDP. Now, this is a really interesting piece that, okay, aside from that it's going to reach 130% of global GDP, the fact that it's going to grow 19% globally, I mean, we're not talking like a small amounts of money. We're talking big amounts of money. I think that that is a huge piece that I think is very important to understand and to talk about. And when I think through, the sort of the massive debt that we have encountered publicly, privately, right, like all over the place. I mean, we're talking governments, cities, states, corporations, people, banks, like everybody is struggling with it, which is one of those reasons that I kept saying that really I don't see us getting out of this mess anytime soon. And I don't see Fed or ECB or Bank of Japan or anybody else being able to actually, increase the interest rates anytime soon, because that would make everybody's debt financing or ability to service that debt an impossible task. And when you have a slew of people start to default, that's when you get yourself in deep doo doo. And that's exactly where I think we are heading. Now, one of the things that, and we'll continue going on to the article that we just talked about. Well, one of the things that we have been sort of preparing for this week is for Congress to come back from their summer part one recess, because in about 2 weeks they go back again until September. Because we all get 2 months of vacation paid with a guaranteed job to come back to, right? Is that no, nobody else gets that? Bummer, bummer. I guess we all gotta go and work for the government somehow. But anyways, so they're actually going into the Congress right now and trying to decide what the next stimulus plan will be, and the negotiations have started, but nowhere near close. They're politicizing everything now. So if one side proposes something, even if it's good, the other side says automatic no, and they come up with something else. So now we're entering this like really weird era that I have been basically expecting, that we've been practicing it with China, with Russia, with Latin America, with Europe. I mean, we started all over the place, tit for tat, and now we're doing that inside our own country, divided as always. To go in, and I know the name is United States, but it doesn't feel united these days, y'all. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments and in the chat. And by the way, if you're watching this live, welcome, welcome, welcome. Feel free to sign in, say hello, subscribe to the notifications. And, as always, we're going to chat and hang out and answer questions at the end of the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, do me a huge favor, hit the like button right now. Do subscribe and get the bell button so you get notified every single time the show goes live, which is every day. Every day, every morning, we go live, 7 a.m., only on onedealaway.com. So anyways, so they're not agreeing to much of anything. One side says we need to support people that are unemployed and give them extra money, because that extra, while it was paying more than a job, and I don't know that I agree that it should do that, because I don't know that I agree that somebody should make more money working than not working. Um, and at the same time, I also don't believe that you need to cut it altogether. And for some reason, our government has sort of like you know, all the way here or all the way here. They can never sort of understand that you can't. It's not like, I used to. We used to pick on my dad. My dad, when he was healthier and he could drive and stuff, and he would sit and drive in a car, and when he would get cold, he would switch the heater thing all the way to one end, right, like to the hottest of the hot, set it on the highest, and that thing would blow to the point where like, perspirating like you're gasping for air, and then he would take it and he would wham switch it all the way to the other end, then full blast, and then it would blow cold air, so now you're like freezing to death. And so we had this like really lovely hydrotherapy of sorts, although it wasn't hydro, happening. And I feel like our government does the same thing. They either give you way extra, now you're making, 15, 20% more than you made when you were having a job, all the way to now they're like absolutely nothing. And now you're like going for broke. So I think that there needs to be some sort of middle of the road thing happening, but we'll see what they'll end up doing. And as they end up pushing out the news, I will be sure to cover them right here on Money Matters Live. So make sure you tune in and pay attention to that stuff. But let's go back to this article about debt. Now, the U.S. company started this year with nearly $10 trillion debt, or just under 5% of the GDP debt. And then you had the U.S. companies then borrowed close to 750 billion in March quarter alone. There's already been a wave of credit rating downgrades and a sharp increase in large companies defaulting on their debts in the U.S. The stress on small and medium-sized businesses will be even more acute. And I absolutely agree. Sorry, y'all. Gotta hydrate. Um, now, there's one of the interesting piece that they actually talk about the world as a whole. I didn't highlight it here, but I think it's important for my friends in Australia. We went into the pandemic. Uh, Australia went into the pandemic with one of the highest ratios, about 200% of household debt to income in the world. That is huge, y'all. That is absolutely huge. And then what's going on? Well, for governments and central banks, there will be no constraints on future policies. For central banks, the pandemic will clearly lock them into a negative to ultra low rate environment in which they continue to pump liquidity into the financial system. The negative real rates of interest and plentiful credit encourages leverage and force investors to ever increase risk taking. They encourage speculative bubbles. And remember, we talked about bubbles, bubbles, bubbles. I mean, this world is turning very, very bubblicious right now. And, it's not just in paper assets. We see it everywhere, right? Real estate is starting to become very bubblicious in many areas. Stocks are definitely bubblicious, and but the yield is interesting. So when we talk about yield, just in case you don't know, and if you do, I apologize. I just want to make sure, as I like to call it, no investor left behind. When you pay more for something, your yield is automatically less, right? And so that's kind of where, if let's say that I buy a property. I like to always go back to real estate because it's easy to understand and it's easy for me to explain. If I go back and buy a property, right, and the property pays me $1,000 a month, for example, right? So that's what I can get from rent. Cool. If I pay $1,000 for that property, I mean I am getting 100% monthly on my property, right? Or 12x actually in a year because I only pay $1,000 and every month I get $1,000 bucks. When I pay 100,000, I get 1% rent per month, or 12% per year. When I pay 200,000, now I get half a percent. So you kind of see how that all works, right? So that's where it's important to pay attention to the prices, not just what you're getting from stuff, but prices actually. And responding to the damage done to the real economies, central bankers could ignite another financial crisis when the combination of unsustainable debt levels, swollen bubbles in equity markets collide at some point in the future. And what they're basically saying is that at some point you might get a point where things are so financialized, so to speak, right, where debt is so large and this bubble, I mean, all bubbles burst. Sooner or later they have to burst because it becomes super unsustainable. And what we're seeing a lot with the equities right now, there's no fundamental reason other than Fed is pumping money into the market directly. Although they have been pausing, but they are always rethinking and reconfiguring, and so people are kind of jumping in. And a lot of people have been talking about the retail traders, right? The Robin Hood Army. Remember that? We've been talking about that stuff. And I've been telling you how it may or may not be necessarily them. It's definitely attached to Robin Hood, which I find the name to be quite interesting and potentially appropriate. And not like Robin Hood, the guy with like bow and arrow kind of thing going around and like robbing the rich and giving to the poor, which I don't agree with. I don't agree with robbing anybody of anything. But I always used to call that game of Robin the Hood. And I think that that might be a slightly more appropriate name for Robin Hood, Robin the Hood. And exactly in about 10-ish minutes, maybe a little bit less or more, I'm going to be covering exactly what it is that I am talking about and why and how these bubbles are being created and how you're being taken advantage of. But before we do that, you might have heard of a guy named Jack Ma. Now, Jack Ma, he is a Chinese citizen who started Alibaba, which is basically like a version of Amazon, eBay for Chinese markets, where you can go and get a lot of manufacturing done around the world and It's a very cool platform. If you don't know about it, if you do, then I'm gonna start talking about it. But he has a new thing called Ant, Jack Ma's Ant, and he is doing an initial public offering. And there's an interesting piece. Typically, a lot of the IPOs happen in U.S., so they list in New York. But Jack Ma decided to do something different. Now, there are some controversies, I'm going to put it out there, that Jack Ma and his companies, even though they're quote unquote privates, they're very much controlled by Chinese government. And so he's not always given a lot of options of what to do and how. So there could be potentially, I don't know this for a fact, right? So I am speculating, but there could be potentially an ability for the reason behind some of these actions that the Chinese government said this is what you will do. We don't know that for a fact, but nothing would surprise me. Let's just put it that way. So he's signaling start of de-dollarization. And Monday's trading saw continue recent themes, right? Nasdaq going up, more government and central bank stimulus. Stimulus is suppressing the volatility. Dollar is peaking, or so they're saying. That EXY index is testing the post-COVID lows. Buying the dip in risky assets makes sense because they have an embedded call option on vaccine. Because they're basically saying that everybody thinks, right or wrong, that the moment vaccines are sort of confirmed, and we're having some human trials kind of happening right now, but the moment that the vaccines are confirmed and sort of the real thing and mass testing and mass vaccination begins, that stocks are kind of going to go up. So they're saying it makes sense for you to jump in and do this. And you can see this that the VIX is definitely fallen, the light blue line, and the S&P index is the green line here. Now, Jack Ma's Ant Group is seeking a valuation of more than $200 billion as it goes public in Hong Kong and Shanghai. So they're not listing in US at all. They're actually listing in Shanghai and Hong Kong. It would be the biggest IPO ever, and the potential significance is that rise of China and the new form of private high-tech companies. It also is lending much needed credibility to Shanghai Stock Exchange, which they definitely are looking for some tech startups to list. Now, this is also, the choice of Shanghai and Hong Kong listing signals China's deliberate effort to reduce the reliance on the U.S. capital markets for fundraising. Like I said, they typically would end up listing on the in New York and use the liquidity pools here in U.S. But they decided to go in with Hong Kong and Shanghai, and a very interesting kind of phase. And for me, the reason that I was saying that could potentially the Chinese government kind of be behind it is the fact of what's happening in Hong Kong and the fact that the U.S. is sort of threatening to pull some money. The U.K. is pulling the extradition out of Hong Kong. And so there could be a reason that is saying, like, look, we're doing just fine without you. So that's the reason why I'm kind of thinking about it. China's borrowing in foreign currency seems to have also peaked. The external debt was little change at 1.3 trillion last year, and dollar-denominated debt accounted for 83% of the total foreign debt outstanding. So they're saying there's a peak of foreign debt that kind of has reached, and it's sort of starting to sort of go down. We don't know exactly how this is going to go. It's just a guess on one person's part, but I think it's an interesting guess, an interesting piece to kind of think through and consider. China is starting its process of de-dollarization and furthering the internalization of its currency. And we've seen them kind of go out, and not just the fact that they're not buying more U.S. Based financial instruments, right? And they're sort of putting a pause on it. They're not selling, but they're not buying. There's also the piece that They're starting to push more trades in renminbi. They're starting to or continuing to develop the digital currency area so that it makes it much easier for the foreign partners to trade in. So again, it's going to be a super weird and super interesting piece that is definitely worth monitoring. But there's also some reports that are coming in that are stating that maybe all of the stuff and what's happening with Hong Kong might have a negative impact, a negative influence on Asian currencies. We don't know that for a fact. There are many people who are long Asian currencies, and they believe that they're going to perform really well. But again, we don't know for a fact. So only time will tell, as I like to say. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. There is a lot of evidence that historically, whenever we enter this sort of tit for tat thing, that Asian currencies have fallen, but a lot of people are very bullish on it. And so I don't know if it's because they believe that printing of the dollars is what's devaluing them and is going to continue to devalue them. I am still on the dollar bullish side of things, in case you're wondering. And the reason for that is that with the shutdown, we've experienced a giant financial hole. And all of the printing, in my humble opinion, according to me, as one of the speakers that I actually really like on the show says, and I think it's funny. Uh, we're only printing to basically fill that hole, and even then, we're not filling it. I think in order to truly fill it, we would need to print well over $10 trillion. I would argue, potentially as much as 12, and we talked about in one of the shows. And thus far, we might have printed like five. So it's kind of like, if you are digging a giant hole and you need, 10 gallons of water to make it a nice pool, but you only put 3 to 5 gallons. Well, that's going to be a waddling hole, not necessarily much of anything else. And that's kind of where I think we are with this whole uh, printing stuff, and that's the reason why I'm not necessarily expecting that the dollar is going to lose value, at least not in the short term. Long term, anything is possible, but long term, for all we know, all of this Cold War could turn into the hot war, which again has historic premise that it has happened, and I hope that that doesn't happen. To be honest with you, I hope we can find a way to work with one another rather than fight with each other. But again, for that, it requires, they say it takes two to tango. So hopefully we can tango together. And now, the show that we've been wanting, the news that I've been wanting to share with you, and that is Robinhood and what's happening. Now, you might have heard of a thing called Citadel, okay? And we'll explain everything in this show, in this article of what Citadel is and what's going on. And we'll also explain and talk to you about a giant fraud that Citadel has stumbled upon. And unfortunately, they were fined and they agreed to pay the fine. And when they agree to pay the fine, and it kind of comes in, they always negotiate back and forth and say, we'll pay it, but we don't agree that we were wrong or right. So it never stands on their record that they really, pardon my English, screwed their clients over, but they did. And so that's kind of where we are right now. And it's really uh, upsetting because we've seen this with JP Morgan. We've seen this with many other areas where they will go in and they will basically behave in a way that does not serve their clients, but it serves them as the business. And so for me, I always want to drive home the point that you always want to be in a business with somebody whose personal interest is aligned with yours, not contrary to yours. Prime example, right? If I was to go in, let's go back to the real estate. If I was to go in and get a uh, property manager, for example, I would want to make sure that that property manager is aligned with my needs. For example, if I want to rent it, I would want to make sure that that property manager actually benefits from that property being rented, by making a portion of the money that they do from the rent, as opposed to they get paid monthly, regardless whether my property is rented or not. Because why would they work if they get the same pay without doing anything and with doing anything, right? Same thing kind of goes here. The problem with some of these trading companies, they can make way more money betting against you and financially harming you than they do in benefiting from you benefiting. And that's the reason why I always say be careful, because your broker could care less whether you make money or lose money, because they will make money regardless. That's how business is set up, and most people don't understand that. What is worse? Some brokers, Citadel being one of them, that we're going to learn more about, Robin Hood, or Robin the Hood, as I like to say, being another one, they actually make money screwing you over. Let's learn, okay? Let's jump in and let's learn. Now, they were sort of asking, and this is coming out of Zero Hedge, in case you're wondering. They were sort of asking and saying, how is it that Robinhood was so efficient at moving the markets? And people are saying, well, it's the fact that Robinhood, army, and the fact that it's free, and the fact that it's all these, different, teen trading fanatics that are going and jumping in, and all this crazy stuff. And they're basically saying it has nothing to do with all of that stuff. Just like I have been saying, it has nothing to do with that stuff. Yes, it's attached to Robin Hood, but more of what happens under the hood. And I'm super glad that I found this, because this is one of those things that I've been talking about for forever, but I didn't have very sort of hard, concrete evidence to point out that was sort of judged, decided on, and it's black and white. You cannot argue against it. They're saying, and I am saying, it has everything to do with various high-frequency trading platform buying up the retail overflow that Robinhood was so generous package and resell to the highest bidder, effectively having the high-frequency traders, HFTs, a risk-free way of making pennies from every trade, which would then propagate like wildfire across various trading venues. Massive extension in a very small move, thanks to the momentum ignition capabilities of HFT algos. Now, if you don't know what high-frequency trading is, I highly encourage you to jump in and do some research to understand of what it is. But it's basically a giant machine that gets all of the orders, and they make micro orders. They don't make, $100 a trade or whatever. They make, super small spread, but that spread is so frequent, so often, it happens so quickly. And remember, they pay zero for their trades, and the algos are just trading it so fast, because computers can do it ridiculously fast, and they do it in like nanoseconds, right? So you blink and you miss a few trades. And that's how they make a lot of money. Now, what Robinhood does is they basically, see that, hey, Joe Schmo wants to buy Delta Airline at, $15. I don't even know what Delta is trading at, because I didn't look at it. They will then basically go in. They will find it on the market that there's a possibility that it's actually selling somewhere for $14.98. They will buy and sell it a few different times before they execute your order, and then finally they'll execute your order at $15.02. Now, they didn't make a whole lot. They only made 4 cents on that trade, right? But they've done it so many times and so many different orders that it starts amassing to a huge amount of money. If you watch a movie, I want to say it's called maybe Office Space. I think it might be called that, where I think it was like 80s movie and stuff. Or maybe it wasn't that. Was it Boiler Room maybe? It was one of those movies. I don't know if you all can remember, and let me know in the chat or the comments. The basic premise of it was that they have uncovered that they were working in this office, and they uncovered that they could rig a machine because the dollars runs on 2 decimals, right? So it's like $1.59, right? But you could actually go and add decimals, and they discovered that if they were to add decimals and only take like a fraction of a penny, they ended up amassing like ridiculous amounts of money. And I think it was in a movie, maybe it was in the real life. I don't know, but there's definitely a story about it, and that's kind of what's happening over here. So if you can remember, please do me a favor, remind me, let me know in the chat or the comments, depending whether you're watching live or on YouTube. All right, let's continue, y'all. So this is how a few thousand retail day traders on Robinhood move the market. RH, Robinhood, sells their overflow to HFT algos who front run the trades and massively accentuate the momentum. I told you they front run it. It's illegal, it's immoral, but it is happening. And you can actually see, look at this, routing venues. Citadel Securities is one of them. Jix Execution Services, Two Sigma Securities, Virtue Americas LLC, Wolverine Securities, and you can see all these orders and what's happening. And so they'll go in, trade on all the orders that they have actually received and bought. And the reason that these companies here are buying them is because it's still highly profitable. And so while Robinhood doesn't charge you necessarily, it is not free for you because you are paying way more on the back end and you receive way less on the back end when you try to sell. Robinhood engages in practice called payment for order flow. And they are talking about it here. And on July 13th, they're saying Citadel Execution Services, Robinhood Financial Services received payment from Citadel Execution Services for directing equity order flow to this venue. Through October 31st, 2019, payment varied based upon a number of factors, including but not limited to the type of security, time of order placement, and the underlying price. Payments received through October 31st, 2019 averaged less than 0.00026 per dollar of executed trade value for order flow. As you can see, they're not buying it, for the pennies or the dollars or anything like that. I mean, you saw it right here. I can't highlight it because it is a link and it is Twitter. So, I mean, I can open it, but it's not going to change the view at all. But you can see right there where my mouse is, it's a fraction of a penny, but they do such a large volume and so often that it's huge amounts of money. It adds up, y'all. It adds up. So you got to pay attention to that. So they ended up posting this stuff, Zero Hedge did, and they're saying they received an angry letter from Citadel lawyers saying that they were going to basically sue Zero Hedge into oblivion if it's not immediately retracted and deleted. And they're saying that Citadel does not engage in such conduct. They're saying that a few different things, right? And you can, if you go to Zero Hedge, you can read the full thing. But they're saying, hey, front running is an industry term that is an art of refers to an illegal form of trading, which, yeah, exactly, it is illegal, but people do it all the time. They front run it all the time, hoping to escape it. Citadel Securities does not engage in such conduct, i.e. front running, and there was no factual basis whatsoever for you to publish this kind of stuff. They put some other things that I didn't highlight because I'm like, it's going back and forth and stuff. I'm not interested in that. But they are basically saying that, hey, front running is unethical and illegal trading practice. Now, Citadel Securities was censured, and fined for engaging in trading ahead of customer orders. By the way, trading ahead of customer orders is front running. So while their attorneys are sending like, you can't say this because we don't do this, and now they're found actually for doing exact same thing. And even they pointed out, like, that's illegal and immoral. Like, who would do that? And now they're being... So you will see the game that they're playing. They will tell you and me one thing, but on the background, they're doing something very, very different. And I think it's important for you to understand that and to be able to understand what's going on. Because I think it's crucially important for you to, read and see behind the curtain of what's going on and what they're doing with your money and your trades. And you can see right here, facts and volatile conduct. Citadel Securities traded ahead of certain inactive OTC customer orders. They removed hundreds of thousands of OTC customer orders from the logic, and they shared a principal purpose of directing mostly larger OTC customer orders for manual review and or handling. And when do a manual review and handling, then they have an ability to actually to then be able to what you call it to change stuff and to be able to transpire things. And you'll see it in a moment of what they actually did. So you can read the whole thing. And they're saying that Citadel was engaging in at least 559 instances of what the lawyers called unethical and illegal trading practices, aka front running. Now, they censured and fined Citadel $700,000, which is peanuts. Peanuts for what they actually made, and this is part of the problem. They will go in and make these fines, and to you and I, $700,000, you're like, woo, boy, I'm going to have to sell my mansion or whatever. For these guys, this is, I don't know, a week worth of trading, a month worth of trading. I don't know what exactly it is, but it's peanuts. To them, it's a cost of doing business. They keep it, they pay it, they move on, and then repeat doing the same thing. It doesn't stop this stuff. And as one of the people on Twitter said, oh, well, front running retail order flow only sets you back 0.7 baskets. And I will explain a little bit later of what that actually means. But you will understand that these fines, oh, you didn't see it because I didn't change the stuff. So you will see the Twitter feed right here. But you will understand that this is basically nothing. This fine is not even a slap on the wrist, which is why the businesses and the banks and the brokers keep on doing this stuff, taking advantage of individuals. And of course, nobody's found guilty because that's how the arrangement is being made. If you and I did that, I mean, our fines would be through the roof. We'd be sitting in jail for years, prohibited from trading ever. But because this is Citadel and it's Robinhood and they're super large and they can buy all the stuff, it's perfectly fine, appropriate, and okay. It appears that Citadel may indeed have engaged in some of what its own lawyers called unethical and illegal trading practices. And there's additional sort of piece of what they're signing and basically saying like, yeah, we'll pay it. Financial Times explained exactly what happens. You can read the Financial Times as well if you want. The market maker removed hundreds of thousands of large OTC orders from its automated trading process. That rendered the orders inactive, so they had to be handled manually by human traders. When you do that, you can manipulate it however you want. Citadel Securities then traded for its own account on the same side of the market at price that would have satisfied the orders without immediately filling the inactive orders at the same time or better price as required by FINRA rules, the regularly said. On February 2014, a simple month reviewed by FINRA, the market maker traded ahead in nearly 3/4 of the inactive orders based on this review in 559 instances in only 1 month. Citadel Securities traded ahead of 450 inactive OTC customer orders. Citadel was allowed to put the whole sordid affair behind and without admitting or denying the claims. The only thing that they had to do is pay the little fine, which is nothing to them, but they're also required to make the whole, required to make whole any customer affected and of course, the customers are able to sue them. So it wouldn't surprise me or shock me if there's going to be some sort of lawsuit coming out of this whole thing. Citadel Securities fell short of supervisory requirement and failed to display certain OTC customers' limit orders, instructions to buy or sell at a specific price or better. As the Financial Times notes, nearly half of 467 limit orders reviewed by the regulators in the 6 years until September 2018 were found to violate FINRA's requirement to display orders. And the reason that they're saying that this fine is nothing is because of what basically happened is that Ken Griffin, the CEO, is paid, a lot for the Basquiat painting, and they're saying that the fine that he has to pay is a 0.7%, so 0.7% of what he paid for a painting. And he paid like ridiculous amounts of dollars that is basically, I mean, costs an arm and a leg and a firstborn child, in probably like a small country somewhere. It is also clear that the size of penalties certainly not force Griffin to mortgage one of the more of his extensive properties located in New York, London, Chicago, or Palm Beach, or countless other cities across the globe. It is nothing. I need you to understand that 700,000 is absolutely nothing. One thing that is certain is that trading clearly pays, even if it means occasionally and purely unaccidentally removing hundreds of thousands of most larger customer orders from mandatory trading ahead and limit order display rules and customer protections, and be able to front run the customers that you are supposed to run. So there you go. And they definitely run in pairs and are running together. And I think this is incredibly important for you to understand of what exactly are they doing and how exactly they do make money on our backs, pay almost zero fines, and nothing, absolutely nothing else happens to them. They continue to do it. They might like clarify things, but they just become a little bit smarter of how they run this stuff. And just because, they got caught for one thing, how many more of things they don't get caught doing? So there you go. We've covered it all. You now need to understand, and you need to understand why I am so passionate about calling Wall Street a giant casino where people like you and I are sold on a dream that we too could retire billionaires if only we gamble in this grand casino. But simply, that is not the truth. They get rich because they sell, not because of what they're buying, and they get rich because they're front riding and trading on our backs, making money off of our inability to understand the knowledge that they have. They win, we lose, and that's just how the game is played. If you're tired of losing and you want to actually start winning, it's time to exit the casino. It's that simple. I've exited it years ago, haven't looked back, and it's the greatest thing that I have ever done, ever. So, there you go. There you have it. If you're wanting to learn how to do some of the things and what other things exist in the realm of investing that has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Wall Street Casino, and you're completely out of the whole thing, I invite you to come check out One Deal Away and check out the Academy. And I think you're going to absolutely love it, where we teach you all kinds of different strategies and ways that you can invest outside of the casino that is way more profitable and no way to front run anything. So there you go. Thank you for watching. Hope you're doing well. Until tomorrow, stay forever money blessed. And remember, you are only one deal away.